to 5 seconds. Colburn shoots, deflected, score! The Flyers tie it with 2.8 seconds remaining. Excellent for them. So the Penguins have had leads of 2-0. 3-1. Now Couturier ties it at 5. Sean Couturier with his second goal of the night.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. Hey, everybody, it's Isaiah. Just reminding you about Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. They're back. That's right. After the fire, they've returned. And now you have, in the 40-year tradition of Philly cheesesteaks, Jim's South Street down on 400 South Street in Philly. If you're down there, check it out. The finest cheesesteaks, hoagies, and fries in the grandest Philadelphia tradition. You know you want one. And if you're down there, if you live down there, of course, you can use Grubhub or DoorDash, whatever it takes. Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia. They're back. Get one soon. And we are back. Yes, it's your host, Isaiah. You are back for episode number 250 O&B Puckcast in our 8th year here. And we have an appropriate guest, I think. We'll get to that later. We're brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com and Jim South Street. The Flyers are 25, 26, and 7 for 57 points after their victory versus the Edmonton Oilers on Saturday. As we record, there are still 5 teams ahead of them in the Eastern Conference wild card race with 24 games remaining. Doesn't look too good for them, but all is not lost. There's a lot of things on the horizon. Let's bring in our panel to talk about that. Chef B, what are your opening thoughts for tonight?
Well, I'm sure we're going to get to it, Four Nations, but, that was fun. Wow, right? I don't remember a lot of people other than me saying they were looking forward to it. But, that was fun. And then the Flyers come back with a big win against Edmonton. That was fun, too. So, yeah, very interesting to see, what's going to happen from this point out. I said they will make a run a little bit, and we'll see what happens now.
Fair enough. The great Dan Silver rejoins us this week. Dan, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I had a very Flyers-oriented weekend, Flyers-focused weekend, so I'm excited to talk about that. I was at the season ticket holder town hall on Friday night. I even got a question in, and I got an interesting answer and response. And then I was at the game on Saturday, which was just a great game. The Flyers didn't score any goals for the first few games I went to this year. And then I thought it was me, but now they've scored 12 goals in the last 2 I've been to. So it's okay. I'm now allowed to go back to the games again. But yeah, it's a good Flyers weekend and excited to talk about it with you guys.
Got it. Hey, let's bring in our guest, an appropriate guest for episode number 250. I think he first joined us in 2019, episode number 42. And he's one of our longest running national regional guests. You know him at sportsology.com, Locked On Flyers podcast, Off the Post Radio, Sirius XM contributor. Now he's writing for the Hockey News. We know him as Russ Cohen. How you doing, Russ?
Good, Isaiah. How you doing, Chef?
All right.
And all you guys.
Great to have you on. Well, Chef alluded to the Four Nations tournament, and even Ray Ferraro said, I think nobody really estimated that this tournament would take on the life that it did and had implications for TV ratings, which were like, it had 16 million viewers between Canada and the United States. The drama that existed over the course of the tournament, especially when the United States and Canada played for the very first time. From there on in, it was like the event in sports. What are your impressions, and what do you think is going to happen from here on out with regard to that period of time?
Yeah, I mean, we had somebody covering there from my website, Sportsology, in Boston, and it was great. Before the tournament started, and I found out on the Boston side they were having a little trouble selling tickets, and at the Edmonton game, I spoke to somebody who told me they were having trouble selling tickets in Montreal too initially. So I think that's where, if people say, well, nobody should have thought it was going to fail, that's the only reason people were thinking it, because tickets weren't selling. I never questioned the players. I knew once the players put on their country sweaters, they were going to play hard. Like, that wasn't a question to me. I didn't really piece together what it might do Olympic-wise until the rosters were put together. So, like, when they first announced it, I was like, okay, I knew it wasn't an all-star game. But then I could tell the way they were kind of doing it was like, okay, there's Olympic importance here. And once you sort of say that, players are going to take it really seriously. But it took a little while for fans. I think the fact that the NBA All-Star Game was such a sham really helped the extra followers that hockey got that they don't normally get. And I saw enough, I would say, exculpatory evidence online. I know a lot of times people say, well, the NHL doesn't pick up any extra eyeballs from after the Olympics, and that's usually true. But this was different. A lot of people, I think, just got annoyed with the NBA and just were looking for something to watch. They flicked on the hockey. They saw that it was so good that they stayed with it. And I saw some people posting online, like, now all of a sudden I'm going to watch hockey. I've never watched in my life, and now I'm going to watch. And I don't know the number. It's, I just know what I saw online. So I was like, yeah, people don't usually do that. So that was a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, the NBA All-Star Game looked like an exercise in load management.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Chef.
So now that they've done this and we've showed that you can have very marketable, high-performance hockey like this, and then they come back and have the great weekend of hockey that they had after that, which, almost all the games are very entertaining all weekend. Hopefully they've gained and they've learned a lesson. Do you think they should never have an all-star game again? They should have these mini little things going on. Maybe if you want to make it something, whatever, maybe a mini skills competition, because that's what the fans really like anyway, because you're not playing meaningful hockey when it's an all-star game.
Chef, they're having one next year at UBS.
Oh,
it's already scheduled. It's on the books. So I have to break it to people that.
Yeah, I know, but
breaking Chef's heart over here, Russ.
I know. It's not me. What I think they're going to do is not do it every year after that. I think this is a part of it now. And so I think it'll be in a rotation. So I think this will come up every time there's like a year before the Olympics. So that makes it every couple of years. And I think the All-Star game will get in there in between. But like next year, there's an All-Star game and the Olympics, which I don't think they're going to do after that.
Yeah. All right. So I have a follow-up question then. So we have these teams now. It was great hockey, but do we, when was the last time there was international play? We're going back 12 years?
10. I think it was 10.
10, 12, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
You got a lot of these players that, in their mid-20s, early 20s, grew up watching their favorite stars do this. So to what you said, I didn't think there was going to be any question of them getting up for it. This was something they this was even more so different than Game 7, scoring a goal in Game 7. This is scoring a goal in Game 7 for your country, let alone the cup, So do you think that even played a higher factor in it, that we hadn't had Olympics for so long?
Yeah, I do. But also the players really wanted this. So my take on the way this is kind of going is the players always want to be in the Olympics. The NHL is always like, all right, we'll kind of let it go. The NHL always wants the All-Star game, and the players are like, I guess we'll put up with it. And then the World Cup of Hockey is the NHL's baby. So that's like, all right, well, if you're going to get that, we'll give you this. And I think that's the whole trade-off. And that's probably what the trade-off will be on the next CBA, which is coming up soon. We all love CBA talk. I know that's a big thing.
Yeah,
we should do a whole show dedicated. All right, go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just going to say, it is funny because people were sort of not that excited about this event. We talked about how the games weren't even sold out. But when guys put on that uniform that's got their country on it, it just kind of like changes things, especially not that it doesn't mean anything to all these guys, but when you've got like the Tkachuk brothers, right, who are now basically like household names, they're the faces of American hockey. When you've got guys like that, and you've got a game where there's 3 fights in the first 6 seconds, it just supercharges everything. But I think it really is just because I remember back to the World Cup that was, I don't know if it was 96 or 98, and the games were in Philadelphia. Games were in Philadelphia.
Yeah, Wells Fargo didn't even have all their seats in until the day before.
That's right. It was one of the first events at the new arena, and it was some of the best hockey I've ever seen in my entire life. There was a Sweden-Canada game that like went to overtime. It was tied 1-1. I mean, it was one of the best games I've ever seen. And then one of the U.S.-Canada games was played there.
Right.
I think it was a game that Canada actually won, and then the U.S.
Yeah, I think they won 2-1, something like that.
Won the last 2 games.
Yeah.
And it's just those games when you get talent like that out there, it's just so fun to watch. And it's just interesting to see. You talk about a guy like Jordan Binnington, who took so much heat for his selection and people complaining that there's better Canadian goalies out there.
He took too much.
And he was so good in overtime. Yep. And that's what, listening to John Cooper after that game talk about Binnington and saying, look, I saw this guy in the Stanley Cup Finals in Game 7 perform like that. When we go to overtime in a game like this is why I have Jordan Binnington on the team. I know that in a situation like that, he's going to be like that. I mean, he made the save he made on Brady Tkachuk from the side of the net. Yeah. The save on Matthews was very good too. But the save he made on Tkachuk from the side of the net, I couldn't believe he made that save. And that gives you team confidence to go down. So those are the kind of stories that it's just, you see a guy who's just sort of, above average in the regular season, but he steps it up in the playoffs. He steps it up in a game like that. It's just kind of so much fun to watch that.
Yeah, I always talk about his journey because being a prospect guy, always expected Binnington to make the NHL and be good. And every year I was kind of like, I don't get it. I don't know what's taking so long. This guy can play. And then, he finally did make it. I did cover that Game 7. I covered that cup, and it was tremendous. And yet people still wanted to, slag him. And I always look, I'm like a Binnington truther, and people always kind of rip me for it. And it's like, this is why. Yeah, goalies go up and down all the time in the regular season, but there are guys you can count on. And as far as to your point, Dan, I think the U.S., if they were going to win in overtime, had to score on one of those goals. Because once they didn't score on a few of those attempts, I was like, oh, this isn't looking good. This is because you just get that feeling then. Before then, you were like, oh, they might pull this off. So that was the difference.
Yeah, no doubt, Chef.
So it's 4 nations now. Do we feel like that this could be expanded for, to 8 nations possibly? I mean, and if so, realistically, what other countries can put? I guess there's probably very good players in other leagues around the world, obviously. So
well, you said companies, and I'm hoping Dude Wipes is not a part of the next one. I want to go out on a limb and say that right now.
Sorry.
I know that's my personal feeling on Dude Wipes.
No.
I'm not a fan.
I mean, obviously, we hopefully can do our, they get their crap together, Russia, but you have a lot of other countries.
Well, you brought up Dude Wipes. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's true. It's going off the rails now, this question. So
I think part of what makes it so special is that that for the most part the games are going to be so competitive, right? Like the World Junior Championships, that Latvia is going to have a game, or Switzerland, and they're probably going to get blown out, right? So the fact that it's just these teams that are so super competitive and it's not that drawn out. I think it sort of makes it what it is. You could add a few more teams. Obviously, if Russia gets back into the good graces of international hockey, that could be a possibility. But it was pretty damn cool with just those four teams.
Yeah, I'm just saying it because, like, here you have Draisaitl. He's sitting on the sidelines. He would be like Germany, right? So,
yeah, and Seider. Bill Daly kind of alluded that it could go to 6 to 8, and I think it will. I was at the World Juniors in Ottawa, so I always enjoy that kind of magic with those countries, and I see how the young players play, and a lot of those guys played in the World Juniors, and they get the same feeling, right? And we also have to acknowledge that a lot of times when we see players in the Olympics or playing in these kinds of events, growing up, these kinds of events meant more to them than the Stanley Cup, like especially the Europeans, not so much the Canadians. Yeah. And so, like, we have to understand that. And I kind of gotten used to that over the years. At the beginning, I was like, I had to learn that, I think. But I think the reason the IIHF isn't in this anymore is because there is a good chance that Russia could get involved. And so I'm hoping Russia is involved in the next one because it's not the kids' fault that all this other political stuff happens. So, and players too, from the NHL, same with the World Juniors. That's what I was alluding to. But yeah, I hope they get involved. I hope Germany gets involved. And then you're kind of like up in the air with like Slovakia. And so I think 6 is good for next time because they're probably not 100% on Russia. So they're going to kind of like wait and see. I could see Germany being a guarantee, even though there's not a ton of German NHLers. They could bring in whoever they want from the DEL. It's not like an exclusive NHL. They're bringing in coaches who aren't NHL coaches, right? So you could add to the rosters that way. So I think Germany should be a lock. And then I think that's up to like Russia or Slovakia or something like that, some other country like that. And I think it would be great. I think we need to see more great players. We need to see Russia back into these tournaments to kind of gauge also how great our other players are because they're not facing these players.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but it begs one last question before we move on from Four Nations: is how is it going to affect the season? And we see with both the Kachucks injured, and was it Brady Shea
McAvoy,
or Shea Theodore?
Shea Theodore, yeah. McAvoy, they're all injured.
Right, McAvoy. That was a nasty injury with an infection in the shoulder and the
joint, and then I guess from the shot he got an infection. Yes, people are always going to talk about this. I mean, Olympic-wise, we always just talk about Tavares, and there's not a lot other than that. But this was more physical than the Olympics. I think we know that. Yeah. So, yeah, there are some injuries. I don't know who's missing the season or the playoffs yet. Like, I don't know about that yet. Yeah. So I'm not going to go jump the gun and just say, oh, you can't do this again because of that. Because you know what? I know the fans get mad, and sometimes the media gets mad, but it's up to the players. And they're the ones who made this decision. So it's like, yes, the owner has a right to get mad if they want to. And the players, they're the ones, this is why they collectively bargain things and they want this. So it's up to them. And if they're putting their bodies on the line, that's their choice.
Right. They assume the risk. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, do you think there's any chance that they still consolidate the schedule, but put it at the end of the cups?
No, because the players
they want to go on their own way.
Do it in the offseason. I've heard that more than a few times. And that's why, because a lot of people are asking, why is it happening? Because they don't want to do it in the off season. They want the off season to be the off season.
Okay.
Yep. So, Russ, just a quick note that Ryan Johansson either had his grievance hearing heard today or it's next Monday. I wasn't quite sure on that.
Yeah, it's a little fuzzy.
Yeah. Regardless, I don't think we're going to have any clarity about what the determination is. I mean, the win for the Flyers, in my estimation, is if they have to pay him less. They make some kind of settlement. How do you, just guesstimating.
Yeah, I'm guessing.
How you see this place?
Yes, I'm guessing there's going to be a settlement, but because it went this whole season without like affecting the cap, it may run over to next year. Like whatever the settlement is, that may be dead cap space for next year. Mm-hmm. Because you got to figure the league knows that the Flyers sort of stalled it. So that, because they were in not great cap shape for a while this year. And so if you do it now, you're only doing it for 30 games. So I think there's going to be some sort of resolution with that. That would be my guess. I don't know for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's because it came late this year, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. But I do think I always felt like there's going to be a settlement here, and the Flyers won't win 100%, and he's not going to win 100%.
Yeah.
No, I mean he played right up to the trade deadline last year, and all of a sudden, I can't report to the Phantoms. But so you're writing for the Hockey News right now, and you wrote an interesting piece concerning two prospects that have been in the news. Of course, we all know Matvei Michkov, and he may yet pull off a Calder Trophy season. We'll find out. But also a player he's been compared with is 1 year younger Ivan Demidov, who was drafted by the Canadians. And you had a kind of like a side-by-side comparison. Maybe you can just discuss some of your observations.
So the first big thing is it's just like any other two great Russian players. They're all different. They are. None of them are completely the same. The same way I would tell you Kaprizov is different than Panarin. I'm telling you these two guys are different. They all score. The great ones all score, but they go about it in different ways. So Demidov, the big thing with him was learning, he grew. He's like 6'1" now. So that's a plus for him because both of these guys are dangerous around 5 to 10 feet. And we know Michkov, that's really his sweet spot. He's not really shooting much from, using the one-timer, or I don't even know if he's used a one-timer, just using a wrist shot, from beyond 10 feet or 15 feet. I don't think he's there yet. Demidov has a better wrist shot. And so I think when he comes in, he'll do that a little more. But what I think Michkov is doing for Demidov is kind of like showing him, hey, you're going to hit a wall when you come in during the season. Doesn't matter how good you feel in the KHL, because like Michkov only played up to 50 games. That was his most in the MHL, and certainly not at the pace of the NHL, right? So I think we all saw before the Four Nations started that he was kind of running on fumes.
Yeah.
And so now he's going to, go well beyond that, right? So, but I think the break was good for him. The way Michkov goes about his goals, scoring his goals, are great because a lot of times there's anticipation, like he gets into that corner. But we also have to know that goalies are watching all the video on him. So, as an example, who was it now? When Michkov tried the Michigan.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what game that was.
I'll tell you in a second.
It was right before the break.
Yeah, it was just before the break. And
it was Penguins, wasn't it?
No.
Capitals.
Yeah, so it was it wasn't Logan Thompson, it was Charlie Lindgren. Lindgren told me, he said, I looked at the video and I kind of knew to watch out for that. For the Michigan. So the Michigan's going to be hard for Michkov to score, but it's not hard for him to score on some of the other goals, like from the corner, because that's where he really is great, because the puck's off his stick quickly. Speed-wise, Demidov's faster. Like we all know Michkov has to work on his speed. We see sometimes when he gets his breaks that guys could almost catch him or sometimes do enough to foul him up on the shot. So hopefully, that changes a little. You were going to say something, Chef?
I wanted to say that, like, to your credit, like, yes, the goalies are and players are getting a look at him too. And then he pulls that thing where he had Tippett on the left side of him, and he no-look passes right on the stick to Couturier, and that keeps everybody guessing now. Yes. He's got to do more of that, I think, to keep evolving, to keep everybody honest. Because when you have three players, there was a 3-on-2, I do believe, too. And they were all coming up. And he had the lane to shoot, I think. But he was looking past, and he just no-looked over to Coots, and Coots at that point had a wide-open net because everybody thought he was, he's got to do more of that to keep everybody honest around him.
Right. So what makes him do more of that, and I wrote about this, is the confidence factor. Like, I think we've all seen if he gets a point or a goal early in the game, 5 minutes into the game, it's a much different game than if he doesn't score within the first 10 to 15 minutes. And that's part of being a young player. Like Torts talked about a couple of games ago, him coming over from Russia, all those things, those are all barriers you have to kind of knock down. And confidence is still one of those things. And I know people are probably like, what do you mean confidence? This guy's supremely talented. He is. But if he's not in that flow of the game early on like that, you get a different result. And he's not the only player, like Kuzmenko, before he scored the power play goal, I had a window on him where he played 10 minutes. he was a minus and he had no shots on goal. So there's a lot of players like that need to get involved early. It's kind of like those early touches in football, where I'll use AJ Brown as an example. If he doesn't see the ball from Jalen Hurts in the first 10 minutes, he already starts to complain about it, right? We see it. It's like, he's already saying, like, why aren't you throwing in my direction? So a lot of times they try and throw to him early. Well, with Michkov, I feel like you have to get him involved early. And I think Demidov is similar. I do. And I think the only difference is Demidov will be a little older when he comes over, because I don't know exactly when he's coming over. So he'll be a little older, but he won't be Kaprizov's age, right? He was the oldest. And so when you look at both of them, I think maybe Demidov scores a few more points, but they're both really great. And I just wanted to point out that Michkov is kind of given a roadmap for how the Canadians could use Demidov, and how Demidov himself, if he's watching, can kind of like learn from Michkov and even should talk to him just to kind of, figure out how this season went, because, it's going really good for Michkov, regardless of the peaks and valleys. And he is in the Calder conversation. He may not win it, but he'll be he'll be in the 5, and whether he's in the final 3, we'll have to wait and see, because this is a crowded field this year. It's not his fault. Like, it's amazing. Dustin Wolf involved too.
Right, exactly. Yeah, well, you're right, though. I think he has provided a sort of roadmap for Demidov and to learn from, and that will certainly be an advantage. I think the phenomenon you're talking about as far as touches and getting involved early, that also could end up being kind of like a rookie thing that maybe next year, when he maybe has a little more speed, is a little bit better, it'll help him get involved as he improves. Yeah. So even if that maybe there's a little
playing
bit,
up in the lineup, I feel like Torts is making a mistake on that. He really shouldn't be on the third line. If you want him to be with the guys he's with, then move them and make them the second line.
But like, is it really, what is the third line? It's like, I don't know what line is what. They don't have any centers.
Yeah, well, but he's on the third line, technically on the sheet.
Yeah.
But he should be getting second line minutes. He's starting to get more minutes. He's starting to get around 17, 18 and such. Hopefully it stays that way, because I felt like he was just kind of getting spoon fed for a little too long for the kind of talent that he was showing that he has. And I think they're getting it right now.
Gotcha.
Hopefully now that they've had the break and he came back energized, if Couturier is able to just play like he did in that game against Edmonton with Tippett and Michkov, I feel like that line will probably get as many minutes as any other line, on average, at least the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. But he's not going to be getting Macklin Celebrini minutes, right?
No, he probably won't. But should he? I can make an argument he should. But yeah, he's not.
Depends on. I do think he looked like he was maybe a little bit run down.
Yeah, early on, but he's had the time to rest.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully you just give him that runway and see what happens. And it is funny. I will get into some more Flyers stuff later, but it is funny seeing Ristolainen out there on the power play. And my only thought on the top unit, is, man, they just got to be praying he scores as many points as possible so they can move him.
Right. Oh, there's no doubt they're showcasing him. I mean, I think we all know, maybe you guys won't agree, there's no reason for Emil Andre to be in Lehigh. He shouldn't even be in Lehigh. No. He should be up on the Flyers' top power play. Like, they're a better team with him. They have more wins with him, and yet somehow he's back in Lehigh. So,
I think Twist is just still trying to win games,
Well, you can't win with Andre on your power play, really?
I agree, but you got to make room for Andre, and that's where the Ristolainen thing comes in.
But Risto's a harder move, right? The easier move, and again, this is something that GMs have to do. So when you have a coach that's just going to put Igor Zamula in, he's not a bad player. He's a good player, but he's an easy player to coach because he doesn't do much wrong and he doesn't do a lot, period. So he does his job. And so you have to take that away from him. You have to trade Zamula, so then he has no choice but to play Andre when you bring him up. Because otherwise, he's going to keep playing Zamula until you do something about it.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, there's no doubt. I think that on most lists, it's Risto and Lawton are always maybe these guys, the rumor guys are getting lazy. It's just like Risto and Lawton are kind of real close together.
Because they've been out there for 2 years. Yeah. I think Eric Johnson's going to be one of them. I mean, why would you hold on to him down the stretch?
Well, maybe the room can't handle losing Lawton and Johnson. I don't know.
I have a question then pertaining to that.
Room. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so did the room die a little bit? Because we know how much Farabee and Frost were liked. Did the room die a little bit? And it's Danny. Do you think they're concerned? Because if they trade a Lawton, because me and Dan are in the camp that we'll believe it when we say it, or that Lawton gets traded at all. And so does that mean we're waiting for an off-season move for Danny, or is Lawton here for stay now? I mean, I don't believe it. I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, he's here to stay if he doesn't get traded at the deadline. If he doesn't get traded at the deadline, they're going to extend him. That's just the feeling most have. I would say, and I think that's kind of the way it's going. I think the young core, remember, the Flyers kept building this young core. The young core was stunned when Frost and Farabee went. Yep. So it definitely affected the room. And there's not much a coach can do about it. Look how Chris Drury killed the Rangers room. I mean, they're done. They're not going to make the playoffs. Just with the Trouba move, just finding out all the intricacies of the Trouba move, that killed their room. So this definitely hurt the room. I think it bounced back. But I don't think you should make that a reason. Like, you can't trade Scott Lawton because you're worried about the room. You can't. That's the coach's job to keep the room. You can't worry about that. Again, Scott Lawton's a really good player to have, but there's a point where you should just sell high on a player. And this is probably the point.
Well, there's no doubt about that. Russ, I wanted to get into some prospects that we've had some requests for you to review. More, we talk a lot about Lutsenko. We talk a lot about Andre and Bonk. But what about a player or two, like in the category like Alex Bump? Now, Brent Flair has been really talking about this guy as enthusiastically as Keith Jones spoke about Hunter McDonald. And hopefully Brent Flair has a better handle on things.
He should, but, he's had some ups and downs with his drafts. I would say this. Alex is a really good player. He's 25th in the nation, although he's tied with Cole Knuble too. They're both at that point. He still needs to be able to keep pace, right? So he has to get faster. He's got good tools. He's definitely smart. He's definitely got a physical edge. When he was in camp, I was like, man, you really got to get faster, because that's the only thing that could get him off the fourth line onto the third line, or even just as a regular in the NHL, just that extra foot speed. So, you hope that comes. I saw some things online, and I would just say this. I'm not looking for Alex Bump sooner or later, like meaning he could be on the Flyers before you know it. No, he needs to go and have a full AHL season, and then you should see what you want to do with Alex Bump. Just because he's 6'1", 200 pounds doesn't mean he should get an early look in the NHL, because, again, I think things are going to change for him. And I think like I said, he needs to play more at pace. I think there's a few more things that he could do. Right now, it's not like he's dominating in NCAA hockey. He's a little more than a point a game, but it's not like crazy numbers like what Celebrini had last year or something like that, or Gabe Perreault or somebody like that. But it doesn't mean he can't play in the NHL. I think he can, but I think they have to be very patient with him. This extra enthusiasm is fine as long as you go through the right steps. Don't rush the kid.
Developmentally.
Yeah, developmentally.
Yeah, Chef.
Well, since you mentioned Cole Knuble, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Cole Knuble, I really liked him. It's funny, in his draft year. And he's different than his dad, right? He's just a different guy. But Cole Knuble, what's interesting about him is whether he's truly a center or not, and he might be, he's had a lot of good tutelage. I forget who it was. Matt Cullen, I think, used to be his coach in the USHL. So he really schooled him, and he was like an unofficial coach for the team that he was on, and really helped him with faceoffs, and he's still pretty good at it. I don't know if he'll actually be an NHL center, though. But he might be one of those guys that, again, we see this now where whatever your strong hand is, sometimes you get faceoffs even as a winger, right? And sometimes it's good to have those former centers on the line. He's looked really good. He still needs time in the AHL too, though. Yeah. So I think he's a little less likely to make it to the NHL than Bump, even though they have the same points because of the kinds of games they play. So in other words, what I mean is Knuble's like a third line or bust kind of guy, where Bump you could see on third or fourth, depending on how things shake out. I don't know if Knuble could play the fourth, because I don't know if he has that physical nature enough. So, but I do like what I see. So I think, right now he's looking pretty good. So, give him time.
How about Carson Bjornsson?
Yeah. I like him. I thought it was horrible what Hockey Canada did to him in the World Juniors, where he wasn't even registered. So I don't know if people realize, but like when you're not registered, you don't even get to suit up. Like he didn't, so he wasn't doing any of that. And it was just like, hey, we got you just in case. He was kind of like almost like an e-bug kind of situation from what people were telling me. Because by the time I got there, it was the finals and stuff, and there was no way he was going to play. I thought for sure when they picked him, he might get in a game. He didn't. I think he's good. I think he, as goalies go, probably still 3-4 years away. I think that's realistic. But I do like what I see. I think his mental game is good. I think he's improved on last year. Just getting picked for the World Juniors is a great thing. How they handled him was not a great thing.
Well, he would not have been the only player that Canada received criticism about this past WJC.
Right. Detlachenko, I felt the same way too. They barely gave him minutes, man, and it was like a little disheartening for the kid for sure. It's great to be on the team, but like when they're deciding that you're just like a penalty killer and will occasionally put you out there for a little boost of offense, it kind of sucks. Yeah. But depending on what the Flyers do with him, it'll be interesting to see. Unless I saw something even better than what he showed this last year, I still would send him back to the OHL. I know now he needs to get out of Guelph though. And I know they tried to get him out of Guelph, and then we heard that a trade broke down. They really have to try and get him out. It's just not fair to him. He's doing really well considering he's on a lousy team. And he's definitely improving. We saw the improvement even in Dev camp where, he definitely was stronger, a little faster, and he had a little more confidence in Flyers camp than he did when he was in rookie camp. And I think he's carried that into the season. What is he at, like 1.4 points a game, something like that? Or 1.25?
It's just over a point a game, I believe.
Yeah, 1.25 maybe. And it's on a bad team. So I definitely like what I see, and I definitely think he's on schedule. But again, this is where I worry about John Tortorella, because he was like, if it was up to me, and it's like, well, luckily it's not, John, because he probably would have made the Flyers because of their center situation was so bad going into the season. But like Isaiah, you shake your head, but that it had to be Danny to step in and make sure that wasn't. Well, next year it's that year where everybody's gonna here's what the argument's gonna be. Well, what could he prove going back? Because he can't play in the AHL. He's not old enough for the AHL. So what could he prove going back? And I just hope they don't do what they did, what Seattle did with Shane Wright, because I just don't like that, where they kind of like play you in some games, then you sit for a while, they play you in a few more, then you sit for a while,
in limbo.
Then they send you to the World Juniors, and then they eventually send you back anyhow.
Yeah. Right. And
look at what Shane Wright's doing now. Like, it took a little while, but now Shane Wright, it was pointed out today how well he's doing, and he is.
Yeah, the biggest concern I have with Luchenko is that he needs to work with an offensive skills coach. He's got to work on his game and play with better people.
Play with better people will be a big thing. And you were hoping the World Juniors would actually be that, but didn't turn into that.
No, it did not turn out that way. Spencer Gill. It strikes me as kind of like a boom or bust prospect, or do you think he actually has a higher floor
I
than
think
that?
He's better than that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Gill is more on track than some of the other prospects in the sense that he knows what his game is. He has a good edge to him. His skating is really good. I like the long stick and the passing. I think Gill has had a heck of a season, actually, and probably should get talked about a little more. I think that, that was a very astute pick, and I think he's developing right on time, if not a little ahead of schedule, maybe. So I think
he's
Gill,
a right-hander, right?
I don't remember. I'll be honest.
I think so.
You can look that up. Chef could look that up if he's not cooking. I would, but I just, I really liked what I've seen out of him.
Good.
And I could even give you an Austin Moline update because I interviewed one of his teammates at Shattuck, and he gave me the inside dope on him because he played like 3 years with him. And he said, look, you know how like people don't like plus minus because they're like, what does it prove? He goes, when you look at that guy's plus minus, the reason he's always a big plus is because he does the right things with the puck when he's on the ice and the puck's going the right way and good things happen. And for whatever reason, and I can't give you the answer, and I'm not an NBA fan, but if you notice, plus minus seems to be a bigger thing in the NBA than it is in the NHL. Like they seem to use that as a more hardened stat than we like to use it in the NHL. But when this player was talking about Moline, he was given a really good report. And I think Moline's got tools. I just think he's on a long development path. But it was really good to hear that. And that's why one of the things that I do is I don't always rely on me. And I don't like to rely on other scouts, right? Because I want to have my own opinion. But I do ask a lot of players about other players because players know a lot. And if you talk to them a little bit, and it doesn't always have to be a teammate. It could be an opponent too. They'll tell you. Players will tell you about other players and give you little inside information about these guys that sometimes you're going to overlook.
Yeah, no, Austin Moline, for those that aren't familiar, including myself, is a 19-year-old. He's 6'5", 200 pounds, right-handed shot. And he was taken in the 7th round last year by the Flyers. And maybe that's
he might be one of those 7th rounders that has a shot at making it.
Yeah, it's never a bad thing. Last one from me, Russ, in terms of prospects. Anyway, Jack Berglund, I know he was hurt right before the WJC, and maybe he's just coming back about now and playing in the SHL.
Yeah, I think he's coming back now. I haven't looked at him lately. I just knew he was hurt, and then I went and did the whole World Juniors thing and got caught up in the Four Nations. But I do like what I see out of him. I do, and he put up with that whole bad airline that we were on. Me, him, Moline. It was John Bailey. Bailey wrote about it. Bailey wrote about it. I didn't write about it, but they did, and we all got stranded for a while, and he handled that well. But he's good. I think. He's a center, and I don't know if he's a high-scoring center, but I think he might be one of those really dependable, like, third-line centers that you need that can really play the position and can play it defensively, too. And so I like that. I think his skating is good. I think his IQ is good. And I think it's good to have some guys in the SHL and those leagues to develop for 2 reasons. The first one is you don't have to rush and sign them to an ELC. That's the big thing. And then the second one is they're really good developmental leagues.
Mm-hmm. And he's a big guy. He's got some eyes. He plays a good two-way game. It's just a matter
really good two-way game, like really good. He's not going to be super high offensive, but the defensive side is good, and the face-offs are good. He's got a good hockey IQ.
Gotcha. Chef, you have a question?
I'm probably butchering the poor guy's name, but Heikki Ruohonen
Ruohonen, yeah.
Ruohonen. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I mean, he seems like it could be promising. He looked like he had a good, Worlds. I thought he played. He was solid on his line, and I didn't realize he was that big. He's already over 200 pounds.
Yeah,
and he's 6'3", 6'2", whatever,
6'2", something like that.
But that's
not
a
big bad skater either. Yeah,
not a bad skater at all.
He's got a good speed burst. I think he was one of the guys I interviewed at the World Juniors. I like him. I think that. He may have even taken his own team by surprise, what he was able to do because he's a younger guy, because he'll get another kick at the can next year at the World Juniors too. And yeah, he showed a little bit of offensive. Yeah, I did speak to him actually. He showed a little offensive burst at times. He definitely played a good two-way game. He has a little physicality in his game. It's developing. Like he's so young, it's developing. This was a really astute pick. Like this was one where it's kind of like, yeah, I see where the long runway on this one's going to help him. And, when you talk to him, he's a pretty smart kid. I feel like hockey-wise. I didn't get into whether he could, give
he's going to Harvard, so tell me.
Yeah, I know he's going to Harvard, but, that's the most overused thing in hockey is, he's going to Harvard. It's like, yeah, okay. I mean, he's still a Harvard hockey player. They still have to take tests and stuff. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to slag it, but I don't want to make it too much emphasis either. But I do like everything on the hockey side. And yeah, if he's, going to Harvard and he graduates from Harvard, he's setting himself up for life for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So that was all I had with prospects. And before I let Russ go, if anybody else has a player they wanted Russ to analyze before I get into the book.
Even if it's for this draft.
I have a question real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're all kind of interested in seeing where the Flyers finish up. And there'll probably be somewhere between 4 to 10, 4 to
Mhm.
11 going into the lottery. One guy that I'm kind of interested in, because it doesn't seem like on average they're going to kind of get to the spot they need to get to for a James Higgins or a Michael Misa.
Right.
But I'm kind of curious in Anton Frundell, how much you've
Mhm.
watched him, what your
A
thoughts
lot.
are on him, and what kind of a center prospect could he be if they end up with him around 7 or 8?
Yeah, I'm more high on Frundell. A lot of people drop Frundell, and I didn't. I get how a young player could have ups and downs in the SHL and over in Sweden. And this guy's got a tremendous shot. His release and everything else is terrific. I think his two-way game is good. I just think for whatever reason he had some offensive problems, although I saw that maybe right before I left for the World Juniors, he started to pick it up a little bit. I don't know how many points he has currently. I haven't looked because I haven't done another ranking yet on NHLDraftBuzz.com, my rank site. But I like him. And if the Flyers could get him, he's tremendous. I think he could be a second-line center. I don't know if he's a first-line center. Now, if you'd have asked me 2 years ago, everybody thought he was going to be like a guaranteed top 5 pick, and we probably would have said maybe a first-line center. Now, because of, a few hiccups this year, we'll have to see. But the talent's still there, and the skating's there. I think he'd be a heck of a pick.
Yeah, thanks.
Did he fall a little bit because of injury concerns as well?
I didn't feel that way. I don't think he's really that way. I don't know that for sure, but I didn't get that feeling.
I might have had him confused with somebody else. I thought he was hurt at some point this year, but I could be wrong.
I don't think he got injured, but no,
Gotcha.
he would be really good. And look, Caleb Denoyer, if they were picking 10th and he was there, would be really, really good. That's another guy who could play center, who is having a heck of a year in the queue, and Elliott's brother, and he's a lot better than Elliott, just for anybody who's might be wondering that. No slight to Elliott, it's just, but he's a really good center. Like he could play in the NHL, and so they're going to have a chance at a center. It's just a question of who they get based on the wins they get in the end of the year. Get a guy that could play first line center. I think what you're maybe thinking about, Isaiah, is Roger McQueen, because he's been hurt for a while.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and that's another, but he's a big center. I think he's 6'5". So I don't think he'll be around. I think it doesn't matter if he's hurt based on that size and the fact that he plays in the middle,
Yeah.
He's okay.
Chef?
No, I'm good.
Good. Well, Russ, we couldn't let you leave without discussing your latest book. It's called Game Winners, the greatest game-winning goals in hockey history. You wrote this book, co-wrote it with Matthew Blittner, who I've seen some video reports on. Tell us about it. It seems to be self-explanatory, but it sounds like a really exciting book, and it's got a great cover too.
Yeah, so we ranked like what we felt were the top 50 game-winning goals of all time. So it's not just any goal, right? It's got to be a game winner. So it could be a shootout winner. And we included the Olympics and women's hockey, for like the Olympics. So that's a hint. There's definitely one in there. A lot of Flyers stuff. You got Bob the Hound Kelly's goal, 2010. You got 2010. I covered that when, that fueled them, that win over the Rangers. We got some, there's some nice quotes from Brian Boucher about that game in there, beating Henrik Lundqvist in that, and John Tortorella. Who was on the other side of that, if you remember. Simone Gagne's goal against the Bruins, I think it was, right? I think I covered that series too, but not in Boston, just in Philly when they came back in that. So there's some great Flyers ones. There's the thing that makes this is it's not we're just ranking. It's not like we're just recanting it. We also grade them. So we give them a grading, and like, how did that goal look? So as an example, like the Bobby Orr goal, it looks great because, he's flying through the air, but he got tripped. That goal was already in the net. It was a cheap move by, the Blues defenseman. He tripped him because he got mad because that was it. That was, cup was over. But he didn't fly through the air scoring that goal. So, just to give you an idea. Yeah.
Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
I know. It's a great picture. It's a great picture. Don't get me wrong.
Well, this is just one Flyer fan's opinion. There is one goal that I consider the most important goal in Flyers history, and I'm hoping that it's on the list.
Was it a game-winning goal?
Yes, it was an overtime goal.
Okay. Uh-huh. So,
And
was it a 5 overtime
and
goal?
the Keith Primo goals in there.
Oh, yes.
No, and it wasn't even the Primo goal because this game had more consequence.
Well, how many goals from the Flyers do you want me to put in there, Isaiah? There's only 50 and some honorable mentions.
Yeah, but it's the most important goal in Flyer history.
To you.
Yes.
So
it's Bobby Clark's Game 2 overtime winning goal.
We don't have it. We don't have it.
Ah. Okay.
No.
Maybe
And there's always going to be some that people could find that it didn't make it, and that's the tough part of it. But yeah, like Stan Fischler just recently reviewed it, and I was happy to see that he liked that we actually graded them.
Cool.
I know at the beginning Matthew wasn't that thrilled with doing that. I'm like, no, we got to do that. Like, I think it's good. I think it's good if we give a little analysis as to why we think this goal was a little more difficult than another goal. Why, so we do that, and we think that added a little extra something.
Cool. No doubt about it.
Get it on Amazon.com.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're listening to this on YouTube or any of our platforms, the link to Amazon to get the Game Winners by Matthew Blittner and our Russ Cohen here will be in our show notes. So make sure you check that out.
Yeah, and I'll be at the Flyers fan club. So if you're a member, then you don't need to buy it. Then we'll be bringing books to the Flyers fan club in April. So I don't remember the date, though. That's how bad I am.
Excellent.
Let's see if I could. It's not excellent because I don't know the date.
Well, you're going to give us the date. I'm not.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I'm doing some filling for you.
Yeah. You got a vamp, right?
Yeah. Vamp it.
Well, he's looking. After Noah Cates is RFA. And after
April
that,
18th.
All right, okay. Good. There you go. You filled in the time.
So what were you going to ask me? Sorry.
Noah Cates.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's really a great second half of the season, and even before the second half of the season, he shuts down Connor.
Tired Connor, but he did shut him down.
Yeah, but he shut him down. So, that's not the first time he's done it, though.
Okay.
All right.
I think they lost the last one in overtime, didn't they? Or a shootout or something?
Yeah. So my question is, what kind of look is he going to get? I know there's a couple other players like Peltier and Kuzmenko that you could consider are getting looks, but I'm more interested in Noah Cates. I mean, they seem to invest a lot of time and energy.
No, they're going to re-sign him. I think my feeling is I would give him 5 years. I don't know if Noah Cates has 8 in him. The way he plays, he's not the biggest guy. He's very tenacious. Sometimes those guys run out sooner than you want them to, as far as playing at this level. Like, he's playing at the highest level he's ever played at, right? And so I'd be happy to give him 5 years. I wouldn't give him 8.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay. So, Russ, what do you want the folks to know about where people can catch you online? And as if I didn't give the whole game away in the very beginning.
Yeah, Hockey News, sportsology.com, NHLDraftBuzz.com. And then, our Off the Post podcast. That's Anthony Mingione always tweets that out. So those are the main things.
Yeah. And on socials, people can find you
at Sportsology on pretty much everything.
You got it. Russ, thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. It was fun.
Always great
Russ.
to have you, bro.
Always great having you.
Have a good one.
Cool. See ya.
Bye. Bye. All righty. So Russ giving us some information there. And like I said, we're going to have those links in the show notes for you. Now we have the pleasure of getting some inside information for Flyers fans that can't make some of these season ticket holder town halls. We're going to have a highlights package delivered by the great Dan Silver. Dan, you're there. I'm sure people were there with bated breath after the Farabee and Frost trades, thinking, "Okay, what's going on here? What'd you hear?"
Yeah, I've been a season ticket holder for like 7 years. Haven't lived in Philadelphia for any of those years. It makes me feel better having the tickets. And so they do this event every year, the season ticket holder town hall. They don't broadcast it anywhere. It's viewed as a perk for the season ticket holders to be able to come and basically ask questions of Danny Briere and Dan Hilferty and Keith Jones. So there were about maybe like 300 people there, and they gave out food, so you could get some food there. It was a nice event.
Nice.
And it's funny is this is the first year, in a number of years that they slightly raised prices. So that was one of the things that people talked about. But really the main reason people were there to ask questions of Keith Jones and Danny Briere. So I got up and asked a question. what I asked was something we've talked about on the show, and something that I have a suspicion that we might see in the offseason. Is I asked them if they were going to potentially look at putting an offer sheet out there to a restricted free agent. I mentioned some names. I said Gabe Velarde, Matthew Nyes, Wyatt Johnston. I think there was one other name that I mentioned, but Mason McTavish. What was funny was that as I was asking the question, Keith Jones and Danny Briere started like smiling and smirking at each other, which I thought was kind of like very interesting. And the response was a little bit telling too. They kind of talked about how, that they're going to look at all avenues, and the reason that they moved Farabee and Frost was to open up their ability to, go after players. He talked about how they wouldn't be scared at all to put an offer sheet out there, which was when we had Kevin Kurz on. He was talking about how one of the reasons he thought that they might hesitate was because all these GMs are friends, and it's kind of viewed as something that you don't do to your fellow GM, which is kind of changing a little bit as we saw some guys sign offer sheets recently. I think Edmonton lost a couple players to the offer sheets, Philip Broberg being one of them. But
to the Blues,
to the Blues, and Kotkaniemi, right, went from Montreal to the Hurricanes, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. So I thought it was interesting that they didn't talk about how it could be viewed as sort of something you don't do, that they want to be respectful of other GMs. They didn't talk about that. They talked about how they wouldn't be scared to do something like it. So I thought that was a really interesting answer. And it certainly did not change my thought process that they may try and put an offer sheet out there this summer. So that was the question that I asked. There were some other intelligent questions asked. Somebody asked about how, if you look at most recent Stanley Cup winning teams, they don't have many defensemen under 6 feet tall. And this person said in the Flyers have three players under 6 feet tall. I assume they were talking about Drysdale and Andre, who are both under 6 feet. And then also maybe they're referring to York. York is 6 foot, and he's kind of a sturdy kid at this point. But the person asked, are you guys cognizant of this, and are you trying to get bigger? And they answered that definitively they're aware of this, and they do understand that they need to be getting bigger. So I would not look for them to be drafting more, guys under 6 feet tall this year early on, potentially. I mean, if they get an early pick, and I don't know how tall James Higgins and Michael Misa are, they might be 5'10", 5'11". But it was interesting. They sort of acknowledged that they do think that they need to get bigger. So that was kind of one of the more interesting questions. I was surprised they took questions for about an hour. Those were, two of the more interesting questions. I think I tweeted out about some of the questions. There might have been one other one that I kind of found fairly interesting.
I retweeted.
I'm just looking back at what
While you're doing that, when you're talking about the defenseman, that's something Brad Shaw was talking about, Brent Flair was talking about, and it makes me think it's a slam dunk. As much as they like Lachenko, if Sam Dickinson is there, they'd probably take one at him if they had. You think?
Yeah, I think they would have taken Sam Dickinson if he was there. The other question was someone asked. They referenced the Athletic poll, where 38% of players that the Athletic had polled said they wouldn't want to play for John Tortorella.
And, we talked about that last week. Yeah.
Yeah. And Danny and Jonesy basically said that, those are probably not the kind of players, why they actually said, well, why do you think that is that those players don't want to play for Torts? And the guy who asked the question said, well, I guess, because he's tough. And they're like, yeah, like he's a demanding, tough coach. And they made it clear that, there wouldn't necessarily be entirely interested in players that don't want to play for him. So those were kind of like my question. Those two questions were kind of what I thought were the most interesting ones. And then it was also interesting that somebody else who was at the game, someone else who was at the season ticket holder event, responded to my thing about the RFA on Twitter and said Briere was smirking before you even finished your question. So I was glad that somebody else noticed that, and it wasn't just me. But they're good events. I think that they maybe feel a little bit more open in answering these questions because it's not on TV. It's just a season ticket roll event. You've got people like me that are out there, tweeting some of the questions and stuff. But it feels a little bit more of like an intimate atmosphere than a press conference. So it was good. It was a good event for them to do for season ticket holders.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the response to online? We saw a lot of people complaining that the prices went up, but in reality, they hadn't gone up for a long, long time. And
it was the first time in 7 years that they raised prices, which Dan Hilferty talked about. The thing that I don't really understand that they put in the press release at the time, and that Hilferty again said at the town hall, was he said that to be the kind of organization we want, to be able to get the players that we want, we felt this was necessary. But they have enough money to spend to the cap every year. So I didn't really understand that whole comment, but anyway.
Maybe Comcast has kind of like, hey, we've got a lot of cash, but we're heavily leveraged with other divisions, and we need this division to do better. Maybe it's something as simple as that.
Yeah, it could be.
Now, Mike, I have a question too. Like when they were talking about the coach, did you get an inkling that like they were going to stand behind Torts even after next year? Because I'm thinking, like all the years, I was, I apprenticed with one chef for almost 9 years. I stayed with one guy, and that guy called me all kinds of names, and he abused the hell out of me, mentally. But when I walked away from him, he always said, he goes, I said, why are you tormenting me? Why are you doing this? I've been here 9 years. I've been loyal to you. He goes, when you leave here, I want everybody to know that you didn't learn something bad under me. So, like, if you go to a restaurant, he's teaching me stuff that people don't do anymore. I haven't done in 25 years, because you might go to a restaurant or a country club or somewhere else down the line where they don't have certain kind of equipment, and you need to know how to do this by hand. I wasn't allowed to use the mixers. I wasn't allowed to use that. All of your skills stuff, So I was making 5 gallons of like Caesar dressing, whisking it with my bare hands instead of using a mixer. That's how it is. Do you feel like with these with I guess Briere and them, were they saying no? Because that was one of the questions I had asked. Does Torts get extended?
Yeah, I mean, probably not the kind of question that they're necessarily going to, be forthright with in something like that. But I certainly think that Torts is going to move up to the front office most likely at some point, I would think. I think he'll probably be the coach next year, but after that, I'm not sure. So no one specifically asked about that, but
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to think that he would be a lame duck, and yet if there are plans to put him in the front office, then it would just be a natural ascension, if you want to call it that. It would be interesting to see who they want to bring in after him. But first things first. So before we go, we do want to talk about the one game that the Flyers did play, which is very entertaining. And Dan, you were there at that game. The Flyers doubled up the Edmonton Oilers 6-3. At one point, it didn't look like the Oilers are going to start turning it on and shake off the rust like most of the Flyers had to, and it didn't go that way. What is your in-game report or game report?
Yeah, well, the thing that stood out for the Flyers and what probably won them the game was the Couturier, Michkov, Tippett line. And, Michkov set the tone with that goal that he scored 2 minutes in. And I think a lot of people were kind of waiting to see how he was going to come out of this little break, because a lot has been made about his decreased ice time and Tortorella talking about how he's kind of run down. So obviously having a week and a half off, you would think would really energize him. And it certainly looked like it. He was fantastic. And then I think what also stood out to me was, the Flyers take the lead on the Michkov goal, and then they give up 2 goals. And they're down 2-1 against the best team in the Pacific Division. And them or Vegas are tied, but they're a really good team. They go down 2-1 against this team, and they come right back and they battle back. Owen Tippett scores that great goal where he just beats Kulak with speed and goes top shelf. And then Michkov, has that amazing pass to Sean Couturier. I mean, what a pass that was. Yeah. And then they get a power play goal from Kuzmenko. So to me, what really stood out was sort of the energy that Michkov and Tippett brought to the game, and then their resurgence to kind of battle back when it was 2-1, because you're playing against a team that, 60% of the time, either Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl are on the ice. It's a tough team to play against. So I was really impressed with that, and hopefully, also Ristolainen was incredible. He played a really good game, and I joked that, he had a goal, he had a power play assist, and then he went end to end. He almost scored a great end-to-end goal. He had a huge hit on Jeff Skinner.
Yep.
Any GM of a playoff team that needs a right-handed defenseman and has been watching this guy play recently and in this game, be salivating over trying to trade for him. So that was something that stood out for me too.
Yeah, I think with the Ristolainen also, just the fact that he is getting that power play time and looks like a definite showcase, but he is stopping plays. And before he got hurt last year, he was playing better. His play, I think some of the pundits that talk about, that put together the trade list and all, don't know that the player has been better like the last 2.5 years, when he started playing just better defense and putting himself in better positions, or not taking himself out of position. So, I think I don't see how they don't get a good offer for him. I think that the other discussion that needs to come out of that is, if we're just talking about Ristolainen or Lawton or anybody, it's something that I've talked about and I heard Jim Jackson talk about recently, was the Flyers have to start looking for some players as compensation. They have so many draft picks. There is a point at diminishing returns. And with the Flyers timeline and some of these guys that they're counting on in their mid to late 20s, at some point, they're going to need guys that are not 18 or 19. They need more players in their system that are 21, 22, and 23. So they could start hitting a little earlier. But so going back to that game, the lines were, you had Couturier between Michkov and Tippett. That was their best line. And I think Michkov was really, spearheading everything. Cates, Brink, and Forster basically got the shutdown role versus McDavid. You had Lawton between Konechny and Kuzmenko. I wasn't crazy about the line, but Kuzmenko's skill really jumps out at you, especially in the power play. And everybody's been talking about his bumper performance, not only just as a shooter, but also, passing the puck off and as a distributor, even from that position. And then you had Palin stumbling all over the place with Hathaway and Pelletier, who didn't really get a chance to show much. And considering Palin had an off game, I'm not going to kill Pelletier. Seems like an energy guy. I don't know how much offense it's going to bring. Chef, any observations you had?
No, that's pretty much dead on. I know you weren't going to see a lot of, Pelletier, I think, and fourth line when it came down to crunch time, in the towards the middle of the end of the second, right in there, you weren't seeing much of them, I don't think. So you kept seeing like the Brink and Cates and Forster line. They were just because they were rolling McDavid like almost every other shift out there to try to get that, to keep it going. But yeah, it was a very entertaining game. It was an awesome game, fun game. So great. And I'll take it, because those matinee games with the Flyers usually don't end that well at all. It's usually the other way around. Same exact score too.
Yeah, matinee games since like this last decade have been usually have been a nightmare. And it was good to see them get one. And Pelletier, by the way, just in his defense, he hasn't played 2.5 weeks. It's crazy. Yeah. Between the visa problems and all that kind of thing. So give the kid a chance. I don't think he's a real high ceiling guy, but he's going to try out there, and that's all I could ask for. Yep. Now, really important before we go, just the draft. I ran a tankathon simulation 10 times. The Flyers currently are in number 8 spot if everything held to form, I believe. So I got one result at number 9. What? Oh, 7?
I think they're in the 7th spot.
I kept getting number 8 came up 8 times.
No,
because there's other teams that have more games in hand than the Flyers.
Yeah, could be.
Well, if you look at I'm just going by points percentage on Tankathon. So right now they're 7th with a .491 point percentage.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I got too. So, I mean, I kept getting number 8 for some reason, and I got one at 9. But the one, of course, I liked was they came out at number 2, just like 2017.
Oh, they just came in for number 1 the second time I ran it on Tankathon.
Oh, okay. Well, Pittsburgh won. The only thing is, the Penguins won in my simulation. So
twice in a row.
Yeah.
Well, I got him second now.
What?
I just did it. I got it second. So one can dream.
Yeah, we can dream. So the Flyers have some rivalry games this week. They play Pittsburgh in a home and home starting tomorrow night at the Wells Fargo Center. Then they go to Pittsburgh on Thursday and Saturday. They are at Winnipeg. It's really weird. They play at Winnipeg, have a couple of days off, and then Tuesday, the March the 4th, they're at home versus Calgary, Winnipeg, and Seattle. So it's, I don't know. It's the Four Nations compacted schedule, so it is what it is. But we'll be back with you next week, March the 3rd. So you have the 2 Pittsburgh games, Tuesday, Thursday, and then, of course, you have a Saturday game at Winnipeg, and that's a 7 p.m. start. So let's wrap up with any last thoughts, final thoughts. Dan, you go first.
I'm conflicted between wanting them to get a higher pick and hoping that they do well the rest of the season. It is fun when they're playing well. And the reason I asked about Anton Frondell with Russ was because he's the kind of player that if they pick 7th or 8th, they might be able to get. And I think he's got a really high ceiling as a potential, top line center potentially. So I'm looking forward to watching them the rest of the season. I hope Michkov continues to have this energy burst, and that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. So should be fun.
Cool. And people can catch on X.
X at dsilver88, and I think I'm also on Blue Sky too.
You got it, Chef. What's your final thought?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be fun. I think they're going to make a run. I think they're going to be in there for a little bit in the thick of it, and they just won't be able to sustain it. They're just outmatched by other teams. Will and determination can only get you so far until talent needs to really step in and help them out. So maybe not this year. Hopefully, I have a high expectation for them next year. I want them to come in. They got to make the playoffs next year. I don't want any excuses now. So boom. So that's where I'm dropping it. They'll finish 4 to 6 out, but it'll be a fun ride.
Gotcha. And people can follow you on X.
Chef to the left B on X. Chef to the left B on X.
You got it. You can follow the O&B Puckcast on X and Blue Sky at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. We're also on Getter at O&B Puckcast, at O&B Puckcast. You can follow the O&B Puckcast on several podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, and Amazon Audible. And there's more. And, of course, we're on YouTube, Facebook. Just type O&B Puckcast and it'll pop right up for you. If you could follow or subscribe, whatever applies to your platform, we really do appreciate. It'll help move us up the charts when people are looking for a Philadelphia Flyer podcast. So that's all we have for you tonight. Until next time, everybody, thanks for listening. And as always, take care.
All right.